The Vedic analysis of how Maya captures the senses, mind, and intelligence is one of the most important subjects in the Bhagavad Gita as it is. Srila Prabhupada explains this with great clarity and depth. The threefold capture of the living entity by Maya. 1. The senses are the first point of capture. The living entity in the material world is conditioned because the senses are always hankering after sense objects. The senses are compared to restless horses pulling the chariot of the body. Lord Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita 2.6.0, the senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. Srila Prabhupada comments that the senses are like venomous serpents. They have no discrimination. They simply want to enjoy. The eyes want to see beautiful forms. The ears want to hear pleasing sounds. The tongue wants to taste palatable food. The skin wants to touch softly. The nose wants to smell fragrances. All of these pulls are the ropes by which Maya binds the living entity. In Srimad Bhagavatam 5.2, Lord Rishabhadev warns his sons, one who is too attached to this material body and who does not control his senses cannot achieve liberation. The senses drag the living entity into the cycle of birth and death because their demands are endless. One sense object leads to another. There is no satisfaction. Srila Prabhupada explains that the senses are the instruments of Maya's captivity. 2. The mind is the center of the battle. Even if a person withdraws from sense objects externally, if the mind continues to dwell upon them, the captivity continues. This is the deeper problem. Lord Krishna confirms in Bhagavad Gita 2.62-63, while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. From anger, delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. This is one of the most important chain reactions described in the entire Gita. Srila Prabhupada explains this as a progressive degradation. It begins with the mind simply thinking about a sense object. That thinking becomes attachment. Attachment becomes lust. Lust, when frustrated, becomes anger. Anger produces delusion. Delusion destroys the memory of one's real identity as a spirit soul, servant of Krishna. And then intelligence is lost completely. The mind is described in Bhagavad Gita 6.6 as either the friend or the enemy of the conditioned soul. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his very mind will be the greatest enemy. Srila Prabhupada explains that an uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy within. Maya works most effectively through the mind. The mind manufactures desires, plans for sense enjoyment, and keeps the living entity entangled in the modes of nature. In Srimad Bhagavatam 5.11.17, Srila Prabhupada confirms that the mind is the cause of both bondage and liberation. 3. Intelligence is the highest point of capture. When Maya captures the intelligence, the situation becomes most dangerous. Intelligence is supposed to discriminate between the eternal and the temporary, between the self and the body, between real happiness and false happiness. But when intelligence is contaminated by the modes of nature, this power of discrimination is lost. In Bhagavad Gita 7.2.5, Lord Krishna says, I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them I am covered by my eternal creative potency, Yoga Maya, and so the deluded world knows me not, who am unborn and infallible. Srila Prabhupada explains that Maya covers the intelligence so thoroughly that a person mistakes the body for the self, mistakes temporary things for permanent happiness, and mistakes the material world for home. This is called moha, or illusion. In Bhagavad Gita 3.40, Lord Krishna identifies the enemy directly. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. Srila Prabhupada's purport here is crucial. He explains that lust is seated in all three. The enemy is not outside. The enemy is within, stationed at 3 levels. The senses give lust its instruments. The mind gives lust its field of operation. The intelligence gives lust its justification. When the intelligence is captured, a person begins to rationalize sense enjoyment, to argue that material life is good, that the body is the self, and that God is either absent or meant only for one's material benefit. 4, the false ego underlies the entire captivity. Behind all three levels of capture is the false ego, ahankara. The false ego is the identification of the pure spirit soul with matter. Lord Krishna describes the hierarchy in Bhagavad Gita 3.4.2. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And the soul is even higher than the intelligence. Srila Prabhupada explains that when the soul forgets its constitutional position, the false ego arises. The living entity then thinks, I am this body, I am Indian, I am rich, I am the enjoyer. All subsequent capture of senses, mind, and intelligence flows from this original misidentification. In Srimad Bhagavatam 3.26.23.24, Srila Prabhupada explains that ahankara is the transformation of the Mahatattva, the total material energy in the mode of false ego, and that it produces the mind, the senses, and the sense objects. In other words, the entire apparatus of captivity, the senses, the mind, the intelligence, all originate from false ego working under Maya's direction. 5. How Maya maintains the captivity. Srila Prabhupada explains in many places that Maya works through two primary forces. These are called Praksapatmika Shakti, the throwing force that throws the living entity deeper into illusion, and Avaranatmika Shakti, the covering force that covers the knowledge of the living entity. The covering energy covers the intelligence first. Then the mind fills with material desires. Then the senses run after material objects. This is how the captivity is sustained life after life. In Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 20.117, Lord Chaitanya explains to Sanatana Goswami, Krishna is situated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. As the living entities desire, he gives them the intelligence to act accordingly. But Srila Prabhupada explains that when the living entity desires material enjoyment, Krishna as Paramatma sanctions it, and Maya captures the living entity through those very desires. The living entity is not forced. He goes voluntarily. But once in Maya's grip, through the agency of the conditioned senses, mind, and intelligence, he cannot escape by his own effort. 6. The only remedy. Lord Krishna gives the complete solution in Bhagavad Gita 2.61. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence. And more directly in Bhagavad Gita 7.14, this divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Srila Prabhupada emphasizes throughout his books that the process of bhakti yoga is the only means by which the senses, mind, and intelligence can all be simultaneously purified and liberated from Maya's grip. The tongue is engaged in chanting the holy name and tasting prasadam. The mind is fixed on Krishna through hearing and chanting. The intelligence is sharpened by association with devotees, reading Srila Prabhupada's books, and serving the spiritual master. In Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.17, the entire process is summarized. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma supersoul in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. Srila Prabhupada comments that this cleansing is from within. It is not an external suppression of the senses. It is a purification of the mind and intelligence from the root, beginning from the heart, through the process of Shravanam and Kirtanam, hearing and chanting about Krishna. Conclusion. The capture of the senses, mind, and intelligence by me not accidental. It is systematic, layered, and deeply rooted in the false ego. Srila Prabhupada teaches that only when a person takes complete shelter of Lord Krishna, follows the instructions of the bona fide spiritual master, and engages all the senses, mind, and intelligence in devotional service 24 hours a day, will Maya have no more entrance. As Lord Krishna promises in Bhagavad Gita 9.31, he quickly becomes righteous and attains lasting peace. O son of Kunti, declare it boldly that my devotee never perishes. The devotee's senses become purified senses. The devotee's mind becomes a purified mind fixed on Krishna. The devotee's intelligence becomes the pure intelligence that discriminates in favor of Krishna's service in every situation. This is the complete liberation from Maya's threefold capture. Hare Krishna.